I think the public image of Hunter is best captured by the Fear and Loathing character, Fear and Loathing Las Vegas character, which is really all about drinking way too much, taking way too much, many drugs, and just being out of control. I would describe Hunter Thompson as complex. He was brilliant. He was sometimes crazy. He was focused. He was very ambitious. He was given to just eruptions of rage for the small provocations. He was a complex man. How would I describe Hunter as a parent? Uninvolved, I would say. And I think there's a few reasons for that. First, he was born in 1936, so when he's growing up, he didn't grow up in an era when fathers were, typically heavily involved with raising the kids. So that was part of it. And second, writing was always, that was the most important thing on her. Family was secondary for sure. Not that he didn't love me and care about me, but as far as being like a, no, I'm not gonna go out tonight and see my friends. I'm gonna stay home and, hang out with the kids and make them dinner. No, that was not him. I've been asked many times, why do I call him Hunter? And I call my mom Sandy. And that's just the way it always was. And I think it's because, when I was a baby and, parents are referring to themselves, for whatever reason, he was not going to be Dad. And I don't think he wanted my mom to be Mom. He wanted to be Hunter. So I think that's what, when, little babies like Hunter, not Dad, Hunter. When he would have these outbursts of rage, it was, the primary thing was just yelling. But, he could really yell. He had this deep, booming voice. And I think the scariest thing about him when he was angry is he could be just savage with his words. He didn't get physical, or rarely. His primary tool was to say something really cutting and vicious. And because he was so smart and so perceptive, he knew exactly how to really, just go right to the core of somebody. So that was the worst thing to see. And then, he also threw things. And he didn't throw things at people, but, throwing a plate of food against the wall, high speed, that's pretty damn scary. And I think that was his intent. It was to make a point, and to make it clear that he was in control, and that the thing to do was for other people to recognize that and submit. That was the point, and it worked. It worked. It worked with kids. It worked with adults. It was very effective. I was absolutely afraid of him. Part of it was I was afraid of the possibility of him getting angry. So if I had a friend over, in the middle of the day, and Hunter slept these odd hours. He would sleep till like 4 or 5 in the afternoon and then go to sleep at, I don't know, 2 or 3 or something, 5 or 6, I don't know. So during the day he was asleep. So there was this mandate: be quiet, do not wake Hunter up. And there really wasn't like a or else. It was just implied. It'll be a bad thing. You do not want to, do not wake the sleeping dragon. you know. And then he would have these outbursts, and you know, it was just the possibility of making him that angry was terrifying, you know, to a little kid. And he was a big guy, and he was loud, and you know, when he was angry, he was really scary. So yeah, I was definitely scared of him. And what's funny is that, I mean, he never hit me. I can't think that he really was like verbally abusive. He certainly was to other people. But it's funny, that didn't matter. You know, it was just a possibility, knowing that he could do that, you know, being afraid that he would do it to me. When I think of Hunter being angry, the event that stands out most clearly is one night after my mom and he had been arguing, you know, we're still there in the house. She called the police, which was something he just did not do. She called the police and they came, and my mom was she was getting some drawers of clothes from her room to take outside, put them in the car so we could, you know, drive away. And I remember him grabbing the drawer of clothes from her, and, you know, something like, well, you know, you're not going anywhere with that. And it was just a cruel thing to do, you know, just to for him to just demand that obedience and to exert so much control. And I just, you know, I was like 11 years old, like 5 feet tall, you know, I was a little scrawny kid, and I lost it. And I just started screaming at him, and, you know, tried to hit him, and the, you know, cop grabbed me and, you know, held me back, and there wasn't, I was a little kid, there wasn't anything I could do, but I just couldn't stand anymore. I was just so outraged at what a bastard he was. And that really did sort of set my perception of who he was for several years, until I was able to realize, all right, well, that's part of him. It's part of him, but it's, you know, that's not all there is. I mean, the single biggest issue was watching those fights, and just how he treated my mom in the 2 years or so, you know, between when that tension really erupted and became visible to me to when my mom decided to, you know, move out of the house and start the divorce process. And then, oddly, that kind of started the beginning of our reconciliation too, because now I no longer lived with them, and I wanted a relationship with him. It was a complicated time. On one hand, I just, you know, at times I hated him, but he was also my father, and I wanted a relationship. So he would invite me out sometimes, and I'd go out and, you know, spend the night, and we would begin to build that relationship that we never had before. And then it took years and years of, you know, going to visit him, and then things would blow up, and, you know, be more anger and tension, and then try again. And there were blow-ups over, it could be tiny things, like once I was there and he noticed that a book was missing from his bookshelf, and so he started getting worked up and hinting that you know, maybe I had stolen his books. And I mean, that's just like paranoid thinking, you know. And sometimes I just get really angry, and I'd yell at him, and then we cool down and start again. But I'm just really grateful that both of us kept trying. We didn't give up. And as I got older, it got easier. I was able to have more distance. It's a whole different thing when you can choose to be there, as opposed to being in a house where you really don't want to be, but there's nowhere you can go. And knowing that I could, if things get weird, I can just leave. That made it a whole lot easier. And he really, for his part, he really tried to moderate, to sort of suppress, his impulses when I would visit, at least for a couple days. The nature of our reconciliation was not based in talking about it. That was not the kind of guy he was. That was certainly not his generation or his background. They kept that stuff to themselves. And I think by nature he was not a guy to talk about his feelings, or particularly wanting to know how anybody else felt. So it was all indirect, which certainly made it complicated. Because my generation is more about, hey, here's how I'm feeling. Let me tell you about it. And he just didn't. He didn't know what to do with that. So it tended to be more indirect. One of the big things that I finally realized is that he would try to, show his love and concern. He wouldn't say it. It would be things like, as I was getting ready to, leave, after staying there for a weekend, he'd say, here's $200, get some tires. And at first I was like, I don't need tires, what? And then I with the help of some friends, began to realize maybe this is what he's doing is he's trying to say he loves me in this really indirect way. And when I started to consider that, it's like, oh, okay, I can. It's like a different language, and that really helped a lot once I could start to look at what he was doing and what he was saying in that way, like learning to translate it. I am positive that he felt very guilty about how he was a father. I think Hunter felt guilty about all kinds of things, and yeah, I think he felt guilty about the divorce and about his behavior and not being around. One thing he would tell his friends, once I was an adult, he was so proud that I was had a regular job, and got married, and that I was not, a drug addict or a felon or he was so surprised that I seemed pretty normal and well-adjusted, in spite of our family growing up, and yeah, the way he behaved. When my son Will was born, it added something new and good to our relationship. Part of it was just seeing him holding this baby, and I would never have thought that Hunter Thompson would be good with babies, but he really was. For short periods, I wouldn't ask him to babysit or anything, but he just held, 6-month-old baby just so gently and really focused on him. I thought, wow, it's amazing. And it was also an excuse to see him more often. he really, Hunter really did have a connection with my son, you know. Again, not that it was, you know, that they would go spend lots of time together, but he really felt a bond there. And it was, I think my son's birth was another thing to draw us closer together. It also helped me to understand how fathers feel about their sons. It helped me to understand that there is this unconditional love that a father has, you know, for their child, and it's not, I mean, it's unconditional. It's not because of anything. It's because, you know, for me, because he's my son. When my son was going to be born, the question came up, all right, you know, what do you want to be called? And he was adamant he was not going to be grandpa, you know, granddad, none of that stuff. I think mostly just out of vanity. He just didn't want that confirmation that, yes, you are 62, or, you know, it's like, you know, you're officially old. So he said, he can call me Ace. Not Grandpa, Ace. Hunter was not happy about getting older. I mean, he wrote many times that he was surprised that he lived to be 30, and he never expected to live to be 67. And I think there were a lot of things he didn't like about it. There was, you know, some of his really good friends were dying. That was very difficult for him, and he was a vain man, you know, and getting older is tough. You know, he wasn't quite as attractive to quite as many younger women as he used to be, you know. And the worst of it, though, I think, was just the physical impact, which was a combination of age and also, you know, 50 years of drinking and drugs, really took his toll on his body, and it became hard for him to get around, you know, and to be independent and mobile. And that was especially for Hunter, for whom independence was so important. That was intolerable, to be dependent on other people, you know, for everything was just intolerable. So in the couple days before Hunter died, Will and my wife and I had gone up to see him, and we hadn't been able to see him for Christmas. We normally went there for Christmas. So this was, you know, our post-Christmas visit, and there was nothing unusual about it. We drove up there, and it appeared to be a pretty normal, you know, a normal visit. There was no indication that he had something, you know, he was planning his suicide that weekend. That night, there was an altercation between his wife, his second wife at the time, and him, and she got upset, he got upset, they were yelling, but it didn't seem, you know, especially noteworthy. I mean, that was kind of normal for Hunter. And then she went to bed. My wife and Will were asleep, and then in a offhand way he said, you know, hey, you know, you might want to take some of these silver cups, or this little silver jewelry box. And I was like, well, okay. And I didn't really think much of it. Now, in retrospect, it makes sense. He was definitely thinking it was a possibility. And he had talked about suicide for years and years, so that wasn't a surprise. And I suppose I should have, sort of heard what he was saying and thought, well, this is kind of unusual. What's going on here? But I didn't. And went to bed, and the next morning, it was a really nice morning. His wife had gone into the gym, and we were just all hanging out. My wife and Will and Hunter and I. He was in the kitchen at his table where he liked to will do everything. And it was just a really low-key, calm feel. My wife and Will went off to do some sledding on this nearby hill, and it was unusually calm, but in a really nice way. And then I was in a bedroom doing something, and I heard this loud, like, crack or thump. And I thought, well, did he drop something? Did he throw something? Didn't really think much of it. Came out of the bedroom, looked over, and he was sitting in the chair at the counter with his chin down on his chest, and he looked like he was asleep. I thought, well, that's kind of odd. Called his name, he didn't respond, and then started to get worried. It's like, he has a seizure? What's going on here? It never occurred to me that he had shot himself. There was no blood that I could see. He just looked like he was asleep. And then I walked over to him, and then I saw some blood. There was very little, though. When people think of, hear that he shot himself, they imagine, blood everywhere, and thank God it was nothing like that. Very little blood. And once I saw that, then it all hit. And I'd say I panicked, really. And I had this thought going through my head that, my God, it's finally happened. I've been thinking about Hunter dying, someday in the future. And I figured it would probably be best, be by suicide, but in a really abstract way. Like sometime in the distant future, I'm going to get a call that he's dead and he killed himself. But for that to all of a sudden become real right now, it's happened, he's dead, I just lost it. I decided to write the book because after Hunter died, the coverage in the media really focused on that wild man persona, the crazy drug fiend, and I really had a problem with that because it just neglected who he was and why he was important. He wasn't important because he was alcoholic drug fiend. That's irrelevant, really. And so I was trying to figure out what can I do, and then the idea of a book came to mind. And then what seemed to make sense was to explain who Hunter was to me through my the experience of growing up with them and how our relationship developed. And I didn't intend my book to be a biography or the last word on, here's a definitive Hunter Thompson. But it was important to me to to show, hey, there was more to Hunter Thompson than just this popular conception.